Welcome to the Big Book Roundtable in the RICO 12 family of recovery resources targeted at people from all backgrounds, faiths, and places, dealing with addictions of all varieties. RICO 12 is also a resource for the loved ones of addicts. I'm Justin B., a child of an all-powerful and all-loving God and a multidisciplinary addict living in miraculous recovery, and am blessed to be the moderator of this roundtable. I'm joined today by Nikki M., by Ashley S., and by David G., and we're excited to be here today and read and swim through a little bit more of the Big Book with you today. Grab your big books, grab your pens, paper, everything else, take some notes. This is really good stuff for anyone and anywhere. All right, Nikki, why don't you please introduce yourself?
I'm a grateful member of so many fellowships. My main primary one when I came into the room was Al-Anon. I moved into Sex and Love, and now I've creeped into so many other fellowships, CA, codependency, you name it. I even have an AA group that I'm a member of because I suffer the disease of alcoholism. I'm just so grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. Ashley, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Justin. I'm Ashley S. from the great state of North Carolina, recovered sex addict and codependent, grateful member of All Addicts Anonymous and Al-Anon. And I'm so glad to be here with you, Justin, David, and Nikki.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley. David, please introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you, Justin, and everybody. David G. I'm an alcoholic. Of course, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm a grateful member of All Addicts Anonymous, probably my primary fellowship of today. I've been a member in the past of Al-Anon and several different fellowships as well. I find that there's one program, many fellowships. So grateful to be here.
Love it. Thank you, David. And I just realized that I don't think in this I've ever said where I'm from. I am from Spokane, Washington. So up here on the east side of Washington, the dry side of the state, where it doesn't rain nearly as often as it does in Seattle. And I am grateful for that. All right. Let's jump into the Big Book. Once again, grab your Big Book, get your pens, papers, highlighters, everything else that you need to just dive in and learn something. Our reading today will come from the foreword to the second edition, which starts on Roman numeral 15. That's XV in your fourth edition of the Big Book. And we'll read through the end of the first paragraph on page Roman numeral 16, which is XVI. And that paragraph ends in the necessity of belief in and dependence upon God. All right, I will get to reading here. Okay, foreword to second edition. Figures given in this foreword describe the fellowship as it was in 1955. Since the original foreword to this book was written in 1939, a wholesale miracle has taken place. Our earliest printing voiced the hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at his destination already. And that continues, continues the early text. 2s and 3s and 5s of us have sprung up in other communities. 16 years have elapsed between our first printing of this book and the presentation in 1955 of our second edition. In that brief space, Alcoholics Anonymous has mushroomed to nearly 6,000 groups whose membership is far above 150,000 recovered alcoholics. Groups are to be found in each of the United States and in all of the provinces of Canada. AA has flourishing communities in the British Isles, the Scandinavian countries, South Africa, South America, Mexico, Alaska, Australia, and Hawaii. All told, promising beginnings have been made in some 50 foreign countries and U.S. possessions. Some are just now taking shape in Asia. Many of our friends encourage us by saying that this is but a beginning, only the augury of a much larger future ahead. The spark that was to flare into the first AA group was struck in Akron, Ohio, in June of 1935, during a talk between a New York stockbroker and an Akron physician. 6 months earlier, the broker had been relieved of his drink obsession by a sudden spiritual experience, following a meeting with an alcoholic friend who had been in contact with the Oxford groups of that day. He had also been greatly helped by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, a New York specialist in alcoholism who is now accounted no less than a medical saint by AA members, and whose story of the early days of our society appears in the next pages. From this doctor, the broker had learned the grave nature of alcoholism. Though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford groups, he was convinced of the need for moral inventory, confession of personality defects, restitution to those harms, helpfulness to others, and the necessity of belief in and dependence upon God. Okay, so there's our reading for the day. There is so much in there. I mean, as somebody who isn't even someone who has really dived really deep into the big book, there's so much there. So I look forward to getting into this and just scuba diving across the top of it. So let's hear a few minutes from Nikki. Go ahead and start off and tell us a little bit about some of the things that just need to be highlighted from your perspective.
Okay, well, you know what's awesome, Justin, is that, like you just said, it's like we're just doing a surface skim. So in a few moments, what I'll tell you is that exactly when we went over the table of contents, this is just repeating some information about the book, right? It's telling me about what I have out here, though, is that second paragraph, how it mushroomed. I highlighted the word mushroomed because there is a much larger future ahead. That's for me. This happened to me in COVID. You could put Akron, Ohio. I'm from Toronto, Canada. I started a meeting by myself. The meeting has moved online, of course. At one point we're getting over 120 people in there. And that's on a Wednesday night. Then I have a sponsee in South Africa right now. Like, this is my story right here as I read this. This can happen if you're listening to anybody. If you don't like your meeting, you can do and it only took, I highlighted, 16 years from then to get a few guys to all of this, for it to mushroom into 6,000 groups. It took me during COVID, the dark times, to mushroom from one sponsee in 3 years to 4,000 people on my online fellowship. I mean, this is my story. And then I have, of course, highlighted, we are relieved of and when I go through my big book, Justin, I put think, because it centers in my mind. I'm relieved of my thinking obsession by a spiritual experience or awakening. I, of course, have highlighted the Oxford group. My line out is like, see where religious people are right. I need to keep looking at these things. Where did it start? I've got to go back. I mean, I like to go back. I like to dig. I'm an analyzer. And so it's like, go back. Big Book didn't just start from Big Book. It started from the Oxford group. Go back. I've got to know these things. What are the tenets of the Oxford group? Because on our last episode, Justin, you asked me, about this fellowship and why. Because I can't accept the tenets of other communities. My father's a Rastafarian. I can't accept those tenets. I can't accept some things, and then I love this part because it says a grave nature. My line out says, I will die from alcoholism. It doesn't say from drinking. I will die from the disease of alcoholism. So this is what I want everyone to notice in this big book. And my friends here can tell me this if they see this. It always repeats itself. I need a moral inventory. Step 4, confession of personality defects. Step 4 and 5, restitution. 6, 7, 8, 9, harmed. All these things. Necessity of a belief in God. Steps 1, 2, and 3. I mean, it just repeats itself all the time. Everything I need is in this book. Everything I need to recover is in this book. So friends, you saw it here. If you're listening and you haven't looked into the Oxford group, find out about the book you're studying, about the people you're studying, and where these ideas come from, the tenets of the Oxford group. I love this. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Nikki, for that. There's so much there. Let's jump over to Ashley. Tell us a little bit about some of the items that you feel need to be highlighted from that reading.
Well, thank you, Justin. That was spot on, Nikki. You've touched on so many great points. I think the things that were jumping out at me was one of the first promises in the second edition. It says, our earliest printing voiced the hope that not some, but every alcoholic who journeys will find the fellowship at his destination. So that's a beautiful promise to me. And just in my experience, how it's all got started is, I took 2 people through the book at the same time. We've got a little group of 3. And then once they've gotten through, they've got more sponsees, and now it's growing. And I'm watching it like double what seems like every day. And it's just a beautiful thing to be a part of and to see the light come on in somebody. But the other thing that jumps out at me is, where it talks about there's a miracle that's taken place here, that we've gone from 6,000 groups to 150,000 in our membership. And, I think we've talked about that in another episode, but why is that? It's because one addict is taking the time to carry the message to another addict, and obviously because of the power of God. And through the power of God, I never thought that I would be sponsoring somebody who's in Indonesia. I mean, that's a 12-hour time difference, but it actually works out really well with our schedules. I never thought, that she would then take it over to Germany. And it continues to grow and blossom, even through some of the meetings that I've spoke at. They've been in Russia, they've been in Egypt. I never thought I'd get outside my little Raleigh, North Carolina bubble, but because of the power of God, that's how it's been with my experience. I think the other thing that jumped out at me, and we're going to see this a lot as we go through the book, but anytime it talks about the spiritual experience, that's something that's sudden, and the awakening is something that happens slowly. So, it happened with Bill, and it's happened with me. And through each of these steps, I've had different experiences, but the whole entire process of going through 1 to 12 has been one huge awakening. So I think those would be the things that I'd call out from this second edition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Really appreciate that. Loved that further insight a little bit into the spiritual experience being sudden, the awakening slow. I'll probably ask you about that here in a few minutes. So be ready. David, tell us a little bit about what you feel needs to be highlighted from what we read here.
Thank you, Justin. Well, I definitely see how the hand of God was moving completely through this, as she had referred to 6,000 groups to 150,000 recovered alcoholics, not recovering, recovered, and recovered again. Remember, from a hopeless state of mind, not from drinking, not from drugging, any of that. I suppose anything in this book applies to me, no matter what it is. Well, I argued that point here when it talked about groups are to be found in each of the United States, all the provinces of Canada. It goes on to talk about the British Isles, Scandinavian countries, South Africa, South America, Mexico, on and on and on. And I asked him, how does that apply to me? And he told me, he said, man, anywhere you are in the world, there's always going to be a meeting available for you. Now, this was way before Zoom or any of that kind of stuff. And I can remember going on a cruise. And I was looking at the itinerary there, and on there was Friends of Bill W. And so I was able to make a meeting, in the middle of the ocean there. Only a couple of us, but one lady was really struggling. So, we were able to help her make it through that cruise. And in doing that, it empowered us. But, there's so much history here. We read in the table of contents that we would be looking at general information in these forewords. And, it starts here at the bottom of it, the spark that was to flare into the first AA group. And I got to remember, this is the first group ever. And it was struck at Akron, Ohio on June 10th of 35. Between the conversation between the New York second physician, which was Dr. Bob. So he says 6 months earlier, the broker, which was Bill, had been relieved by the drink obsession by a sudden spiritual experience. Following a meeting with an alcoholic friend who had been in contact with the Oxford groups of that day, that was a man by the name of Eddie Thatcher. He had also been greatly helped by the Dr. Silkworth, and it talks about he's no less than a medical saint by AA members. Because in those days, I don't need to read a book, and I don't really need to go to a doctor to figure out that there's something wrong with my mind when I come into here. I'm quite convinced of that, and so is everybody else. The prison system and everybody else are quite sure that there's something going on in the mind of me, but nobody seems to know that there's something going on within the body. Nobody seems to know that, and that's how it was in these days. So it says, from the doctor, Silkworth, the broker, Bill had learned that. I'm going to have very little results with the rest of the work that's outlined in this book. See, I didn't realize that step one was a 3-part step. No one could ever convince me of that. But as we read deeper into this, and we will as we go through here, I see that I'm powerless for 2 reasons. Once I put it in my body, I cannot stop. Once I take it out of my body, I cannot stay away, because the mind will always drive me back. I'm powerless for 2 reasons, not 1. And the third is that my life is unmanageable, not because I've lost my home, I've lost my family, I've went to jail. It's because I have a hole on the inside of me, a gaping hole that absolutely nothing can fill. It must come from a power. So there's 3 areas of that first step there. I always looked at it as two. But if I do that, then just like with the triangle, I'm leaving one area out and I'm bound to get sick again. So this is very important information. And as Nikki had pointed out, the tenets, that's steps one through 12 right there. I mean, if you take a look at that very closely, the original Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous was Sermon on the Mount, written by Emmett Fox. Google it. It's absolutely the truth. And you can keep tracing it back, all the way back, and it goes all the way back to the Holy Bible. And most people get offended by that, but you know what? Too bad. That's the way it is. And, I'm glad I didn't know that when I came here. I may not have stayed. But this is so powerful. Whenever you break this down with another person, one-on-one, there are things hidden in these sentences that is absolutely life-changing. So love you guys. Thank you for asking me to share.
Yeah, thanks, David. And I'm going to come back to that too. I'm be talking a little bit about the precursors to the Big Book a little bit. I'll ask you about that here in a few minutes. But man, such good stuff, and I'm loving this interaction and these additional insights. Let's start with you, Nikki. You mentioned the growth. You mentioned working with someone in South Africa and your network being, growing into an international thing from just you in Toronto, Canada, and your little small circle there in that area. I've seen that in my own life too, but tell me a little bit about how that expansion has opened up your own perspectives into different, maybe accepting different people and different ways of life.
Well, the key word here is miracles. It is a miracle. So I've had to accept other people's ways, beliefs, because the book tells me that everyone is welcome here. Everybody's here. I love page 46. I mean, the book always talks about it. It says, I mean, this is really my go-to when I hated God. Let's just put that out there when I came in here. I hated God. And my sponsor at the time had me cross out the word God and said, put power, because no one's looking for God, Nikki. You're looking for power. You're powerless. And then my mind started to open up, and it says it right here. It's like, as soon as I could admit the possible existence of a power, and I did a thorough step one with him, as I'm going through, it's like, I have a spirit of the universe. I could accept that. I'm finding that this program, not just God, this program, you guys don't make too hard of terms with me. You're literally like, Nikki, let me love you until you love yourself. People who know the book weren't like, stop doing this or you can't come. You're like, come, and you're going to eventually see this way of life. And I love it. It says the realm of the spirit is broad, roomy, and all-inclusive. Now, people can't see me, but I have a Lebanese, Irish, Italian mother. I have a West Indian, Caribbean dad. I have Muslim cousins. I like to say I'm a radical Jew, like my friend Jesus. I mean, you can go deep into all these different cultures. So I've already been exposed to it. I mean, I come from California, live in Canada, and I'm moving to Luxembourg one day. So I'm already exposed to all this inclusivity. And this is what this book is about. It reminds me right here in this chapter, basically, that everybody is welcome. And I just need to have a belief upon this dependence of God and a God of my understanding. I have an open mind anyway. Justin, I hate to say it, but I do have a degree from the School of Hard Knocks. When you're a retired burlesque entertainer, aka stripper, you got to keep an open mind. You wouldn't believe the client you get. Okay.
Thanks, Nikki. I appreciate that. All right. Hit that one out of the park at the end there. Threw me way off. So good stuff. Thanks, Nikki. All right, Ashley, you talked about and referring to Bill Wilson's sudden spiritual experience that relieved him of the obsession of drink happening. But you said, hey, the book talks about the sudden spiritual experience that happens suddenly, but the spiritual awakening happens slowly. Let's dig there just a little bit. Tell me a little bit more about your understanding of that.
Thank you, Justin. I love that question. So I've, like I mentioned, I've had experiences with each step, but if I had to pick one, my favorite, most powerful experience would have been in step one. When I finally understood, or when God revealed to me what the great reality is deep down inside meant, that just opened up for me. I remember I was inside my walk-in closet. I fell to my knees. I was crying and sobbing uncontrollably. It was a powerful, very sudden experience, but that never would have helped me if I didn't work the rest of the steps. So there's a little, nuggets that I got each part of the way, working all 12, and that was an awakening for really what my true problem was, which was self. And that's how I was able to recover. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Yeah, let me follow up on that just a little bit, Ashley. You had the sudden thing that's just overwhelming. You hit your knees, you're sobbing, you're in the closet, and but that wasn't going to keep you sober. That wasn't going to keep you in recovery. The awakening side of things do. So tell me some of why is that important for somebody who has this white light moment and says, oh, that's it. I will never do that again. I will always be here, but I'm good now. I don't need to worry about it because I had this. Tell me a little bit about that in your experience and working with others too.
Sure. So my experience was that, I understood there's no separation between God and me. When I fully understood that, and the consciousness of that belief came to me, radically changed me. Nothing else was the same. However, there's still fears and resentments and things that crop up, and lust that was cropping up. I had to spot that. I had to turn from that and rely upon that new power that I had found in order to get through those situations. So if I did not have the other tools like steps 10 and 11, I would have been just as powerless as I was before.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. All right, David, you talked a little bit about the precursors to the Big Book, the Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox, the Bible, some of the Oxford group materials that were used by those early AA members. Tell us a little bit about why that's important to recognize, and why maybe not avoiding that, but why we would be wise in discussing that with newcomers coming into the rooms.
Well, I think if I'm going to give the newcomer a thorough history of Alcoholics Anonymous, I need to tell them the truth. Now, if fear tries to beat them back from that, then that's something that we need to spot and look for. This is just all part of the inner communication that I have with someone that is new. We talked from the very beginning, are the waves separate from the ocean? Or are they part of it? Separate from the sky? Or are they part of the sky? Are you separate from God, or are you part of God? Many of the books that we talk about says, that we were made in his own image. Even this one says we found the great reality deep down within us, just as much as we have the feeling for a friend. So, I don't try to dive too deep in that in the very beginning, especially right here. But if I want them to look at from the doctor, how we're going to learn about the grave nature of alcoholism, then I want to look at the grave nature of how we recover from that. And that literature is very important to be discussed, or at least it is to me, because this gives me a different way to look at things, the way that self and the mind that I've had up to that point has always looked at spirituality. Because for me, that was the biggest problem coming in here. People said, oh my God, don't talk about God. You'll run the newcomer away. Well, the old timers reminded me whiskey or whatever that addiction may be is going to run them back. So, I very gently want to start leading them into this, because when we get into step one and the in-depthness of it, the way that this book is going to lay out will scare the living hell out of a newcomer. You got two men sitting in a bar, or excuse me, a bar. You got two men sitting in a meeting, and they both go through the first 43 pages of the Big Book and experience the first step. And the first one says, hey, man, I'm glad that's over. Look, you got another one sitting over there saying, I'm going to freaking die. There better be a solution here. Which man really got the first step is outlined in the first 43 pages of the Big Book. So, I'm wanting to bring whatever I can, and especially the facts, to help this man see that, hey, this is going to be a scary time. We're going to be walking through the jungle. Bullets are going to be coming from every which way. But trust me, there's a power greater than self here, and we can recover. So I don't know. For me, I think it's very important that I do that with newcomers as it was done with me. I was introduced to the Course in Miracles in the very beginning, Sermon on the Mount, the Holy Bible, which I was not a good, it took me a long time to even comprehend any of that. And I'm not saying that has to be something that we do. I just know for me, I want them to know the true history of Alcoholics Anonymous in this book. And that's definitely a big part of it. So thank you for that question, Justin.
Thanks, David. We've got time now for a little bit of crosstalk. If anybody has some crosstalk here, jump in and if you had some insights based on what somebody else said.
Well, thank you, David. There was something when you were talking that just came to me, is that I am just to try and carry the message across the world. I might not be successful in doing that with some of the prospects that I take on, but at least I'm gaining experience and helping others. You know, they're helping me more than I'm probably helping them, and just doing that. So thank you.
I think I'll just mention too, Justin, that, you know, Ashley, when you said you went into the closet and cried like a baby, you know, that happened to me in year 8. And I'd been in the rooms for 8 years before I dropped to my knees and my money obsession was relieved. So if everyone's waiting for that moment, I had been here 8 years before that, but I was slowly getting the educational variety awakening that our magic book talks about in the back. I was getting these slow awakening, but I've had a few experiences like Ashley where I dropped to my knees and cannot believe that God has chosen me to be the caretaker, not to own, not to have, just to be the caretaker. And I had that change in personality, that psychic change. So thank you for drifting me back there, Ash, because I like to remember the good times, like those experiences that just, rock us into the 4th dimension.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Let's do our quick wrap up here. Just take 1 minute. Nikki, what's one takeaway that you took from this reading and these comments that has affected you in addition to that drop into your knees, remembering that?
Well, what we read today started with the word miracle in the second sentence, and it ended with the word God. This is what this program is about. Friends, if you're listening, don't be afraid when we say these things, because it's happened for us. It can happen to you. And the other thing that I was just so grateful is that, you know, what David mentioned about these Bibles, you know, the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, all these Emmett Fox, all these things. This is a lifetime of learning. And it's, you know what, people, it's free. If you got a PhD from Harvard and you're still paying your student loan, this stuff here is all free. Join us for a miracle of your own.
Thank you, Nikki. Ashley, tell us a little bit about your takeaway.
Thank you, Justin. My takeaway would be that in the years from 1939 to 1955, the book Program of Recovery, as it's outlined in the first 164 pages, did not change. Fellowship changes. More people are carrying it to others, but the book never changes. The solution does not change. It tells us we need necessity and belief and dependence upon God. We take inventory, we confess, we help others, or we make amends with those that we've harmed, and we help others. So that never changes, and that would be my takeaway.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ashley. David, how about you? What's a takeaway and highlight for you?
Well, I think for me, it would be yesterday's miracle is not sufficient for today. Although I had a beautiful miracle all of those days and continue to have them, it's not enough for today. I need something new today. And Bill said it in this way. From this doctor, the broker had learned the grave nature of alcoholism. I better have a new miracle with that every day. I better, or else. So yesterday's miracle is not sufficient for today. Thank you.
Thank you, David, Nikki, and Ashley. My takeaway, real quick, is also very close to what yours was, David. Yesterday's miracle is not sufficient for today. I'm not going to stay sober on yesterday's decision to stay sober yesterday. And just today, I was listening to a recording from one of my other mentors in recovery, Father Bill W., who's a two-way prayer guy. But he was talking about, he's got 50 years sober in AA. And he's talking about how if he's not receiving something new every day in program, it's not going to work. And that's what it is. I mean, my program can't get stale. And by doing these things, by putting into practice these principles, and by doing this, it can remain fresh forever. And I can stay sober on today's miracle, and it doesn't have to be yesterday's. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Such good stuff. And thank you to the audience for joining with us. To learn more about RICO 12 and what we are doing and how you can support these projects, go to rico12.com. To learn more about any of the other projects, any of the things that Ashley, David, and Nikki are working on, check them out in the show notes. I'll also put all of the resources that have been discussed here. I'll put links to those if you want to look into like the Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox or whatever. I'll put a link so you can look that up. Come join with us in this fellowship of the Spirit and come trudge this adventurous and amazing road of happy destiny with us. Work it. You are worth it.